If she makes me regret this marriage, you win. King Ethan Blackwood's voice was quiet enough to vanish beneath the music, but every alpha gathered around the marble table heard him. Beyond their private circle, the winter moon ball glittered beneath crystal chandeliers, hundreds of candles turning the Blackwood Palace ballroom gold, while violins carried a sweeping melody through the crowd. Ethan heard none of it. He saw bows moving across strings. He saw mouths opening in laughter. He watched champagne tremble faintly inside his glass whenever the musicians reached a powerful note. For 12 years, that was what music had been to him. Movement without sound, celebration trapped behind glass. Madison Reed leaned closer, amusement bright in her blue eyes. 30 days, she said carefully, making certain Ethan could read her lips. Marry an ordinary Omega for 30 days. No noble blood. No political advantage. No carefully trained court darling. If you last without sending her away, Ryan owes you his best stallion. Ryan Cole rolled his eyes and lifted his glass. Ethan almost smiled. It was a foolish wager, exactly the sort of meaningless entertainment people invented when they had never known true silence. Then Madison's gaze moved past him. There, she said. Ethan followed her eyes. A young woman was crossing the far edge of the ballroom carrying a wooden case filled with small bottles and bundles of dried herbs. Her chestnut hair had been pinned simply at the back of her head, and her pale green dress looked almost plain among the jeweled gowns surrounding her. Nobody moved aside for her. She simply adjusted her path each time someone stepped into it, quiet and practiced, as though being overlooked had become a skill. Emily Carter, Madison said. An Omega from the infirmary. Ethan watched Emily kneel beside an elderly servant who had dropped a handkerchief. She picked it up, but instead of immediately walking away, she noticed the woman's trembling fingers. Emily opened her case, found a small vial, and pressed it gently into the servant's palm. No audience. No attempt to be noticed. Just kindness performed when she believed nobody important was watching. Something about that made Ethan's smile disappear. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. If you believe that kindness is power, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us, love redeems the broken. Now back to Emily. She rose and continued toward the infirmary corridor, unaware that the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories was still watching her. Madison tapped the table impatiently. Well, Ethan should have refused. A marriage was not a card game, and that woman had done nothing to deserve becoming part of one. Yet years of court whispers had hardened something inside him. People spoke around a deaf king as though silence made him less capable of understanding humiliation. Tonight, perhaps recklessness felt easier than dignity. Ethan set down his glass. 30 days. Ryan's eyebrows rose. Madison grinned. Across the ballroom, Emily suddenly stopped. A silver bell hanging beside the infirmary entrance had begun swinging as the door opened. Ethan couldn't hear it, but a familiar pressure stabbed deep inside his left ear. His fingers rose instinctively toward it. Emily turned. From nearly 40 feet away, her eyes found his hand against his ear. Her expression changed. Not pity. Recognition. Ethan lowered his hand slowly. Emily stared at him for one heartbeat too long, as if she had noticed something every royal healer had missed. Then 2 guards approached her. Emily's face went pale when one bowed and delivered the message. She looked across the crowded ballroom directly at Ethan. The room remained perfectly silent to him as he lifted his gaze to hers. Bring me the Omega. Emily Carter had spent most of her life learning how to become invisible in rooms built for powerful people, but invisibility was impossible when 2 royal guards were waiting for her. She tightened her fingers around the wooden medicine case and followed them across the ballroom. Conversation softened as she passed. Some guests stared openly. Others looked at her plain green dress, then toward the raised royal table, trying to understand why an Omega from the infirmary had been summoned by the king. Emily wondered the same thing. She had met Ethan Blackwood only through portraits, proclamations, and the stories people whispered when they thought royal ears were far away. None of those stories had mentioned how carefully he watched the world. His silver-gray eyes followed movement with unsettling precision. When someone spoke to him, his attention settled immediately on their mouth. When Madison Reed turned her face away while talking, his expression hardened almost imperceptibly. He was reading lips, Emily realized. Not guessing. Reading. She stopped several feet from the table and lowered her head respectfully. Ryan Cole said something she could not catch, but Ethan did not respond until Ryan moved into his line of sight and repeated it. Another detail. Emily raised her eyes. Ethan was studying her now. Madison smiled as though Emily had arrived to provide entertainment. "Miss Carter," she said, "His Majesty has taken an unexpected interest in you." Emily felt several nearby guests lean closer. "I am honored," she answered carefully. Ethan's gaze remained on her lips. That confirmed it. Emily turned fully toward him before speaking again. "How may I help you, Your Majesty?" Something changed in his face, small enough that everyone else missed it. Surprise. Emily understood why. People who knew he was deaf often exaggerated their mouths or raised their voices as though volume could cross a silence that sound itself could not. Emily did neither. She simply made sure he could see her. Ethan motioned toward the empty chair opposite him. She sat, placing her medicine case beside her feet. A servant crossed behind Ethan carrying a tray. One glass slipped against another with a sharp chime. Several guests glanced toward it. Ethan did not. Emily did. Then the silver bell near the infirmary corridor rang again. Ethan's shoulders tightened. His left hand moved toward his ear before stopping halfway. Emily forgot the watching crowd. Her mother had taught her that pain often spoke through movements people made before they remembered to hide them. "Does your left ear hurt?" she asked. Madison gave a quiet laugh. Ryan went still. Ethan stared at Emily. She wondered whether she had crossed some invisible royal boundary. Then he reached for a small writing pad beside his glass. His handwriting was controlled and angular. He turned the page toward her. "I cannot hear. Pain is irrelevant." Emily read it twice. She looked at his left ear, then at the bell almost 40 feet away. "Those are not the same thing," she said. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Emily could feel the room waiting for her to apologize. Instead, she opened her medicine case and removed a small brass listening instrument that had belonged to her mother. Madison's amusement faded. "What exactly do you think you are doing?" Emily kept her attention on Ethan, not treating him. She paused, watching another faint pulse of discomfort cross his expression when the bell moved. "Not yet." Ethan leaned forward slightly. Emily lowered her voice, even though she knew the gesture was meaningless to him. "Your Majesty, if you truly cannot hear anything, then that bell should not cause you pain." For the first time since she had approached the royal table, Ethan stopped looking at her mouth. His eyes locked onto hers. Emily felt a cold certainty settle beneath her ribs. The Alpha King was deaf, but whatever had stolen his hearing might still be inside him. By midnight, Emily had been given a marriage proposal she did not understand, and less than 10 minutes to decide whether refusing it would insult the most powerful man in the Northern Territories. She stood inside a quiet receiving room beyond the ballroom, her medicine case still clutched against her skirt, while Ethan waited beside a tall window overlooking the snow-covered palace grounds. Without the chandeliers and watching nobles around him, he seemed different, less like the distant king painted above government halls and more like a man accustomed to standing where he could see every doorway. Ryan Cole remained near the fireplace as witness. Madison had not been invited. Ethan handed Emily a sheet of paper. The message was simple. He wished to marry her. The ceremony could take place the following evening. Emily read the words twice before looking up. "Why me?" Ethan washed her lips, then wrote again. "You noticed something others did not." It was an answer, but not enough of one. Emily knew women from influential alpha families had traveled hundreds of miles hoping to attract his attention. She had arrived at the palace that morning carrying fever remedies. Nobody chose an infirmary Omega by accident. "Is this political?" she asked. Ethan hesitated. Ryan looked toward the fire. That tiny movement made uneasiness stir inside her, but Ethan wrote, "No." He did not tell her about the wager. Emily studied him for several seconds. He could have ordered half the kingdom to obey him, yet he waited for her answer without pressing forward, without allowing his rank to fill the silence for him. "I have one condition," she said. Ethan lifted an eyebrow. "If I become your wife, I remain a healer. I will not become decoration for the court." Something almost warm touched his expression. He wrote one word. "Agreed." The wedding came beneath a pale winter moon the next evening. Blackwood Palace transformed overnight. White candles lined the ceremonial hall, evergreen branches framed the stone columns, and nearly 300 guests filled the seats beneath the royal crest. Emily wore an ivory gown chosen by palace attendants, simple enough that she still recognized herself in the mirror. As she entered, whispers followed her down the aisle. She could not distinguish every word, but she caught enough. Infirmary. Omega. Impossible. Madison stood near the front wearing silver, her smile too pleased for someone attending another woman's wedding. Emily felt the warning in her stomach again. Then Ethan turned toward her, and everything else seemed to recede. He wore formal black, his silver-gray eyes fixed on her face. The officiant began the vows. Emily noticed Ethan watching the man's lips with intense concentration. When someone shifted in front of his view, Ethan missed an entire sentence. Emily understood. When her turn came, she stepped slightly closer and made certain her face remained clearly visible. I, Emily Carter, enter this marriage by my own choice, and I promise that whatever truth stands between us, I will meet it honestly. Ethan's expression changed at the word truth. Only for an instant. Emily saw it. Still, when he spoke his own vow, his voice was measured and deeper than she expected, shaped by years of speaking without hearing himself. The hall became completely still. Afterward, applause rose around them. Ethan could not hear it. He only saw hands meeting and smiling faces turning toward him. Emily watched his eyes move across the celebration, and suddenly the grandeur felt strangely cruel. Hundreds of people were cheering for a man living inside silence. She turned toward him and smiled, so he would have something real to see. Ethan looked at her as if no one had ever thought to do that before. Then Emily noticed Madison across the hall, quietly raising a champagne glass toward Ryan. Ryan did not return the gesture. Madison mouthed two words Emily could not quite understand. 30 days. Emily's smile slowly disappeared. Emily did not ask what 30 days meant. Not that night. She had learned long ago that people revealed more when they believed no one was watching, and Madison Reed had looked far too satisfied with herself for Emily to waste the clue on a careless question. Instead, she followed Ethan through the quiet upper halls of Blackwood Palace, where the celebration faded behind heavy oak doors and thick stone walls. A royal attendant showed Emily to a private suite adjoining Ethan's chambers, then disappeared with a respectful bow. There was no awkward expectation waiting for her, only a warm fire, shelves of books, a writing desk, and the medicine case someone had thoughtfully carried upstairs. Emily touched its worn wooden handle. Ethan had remembered. A few minutes later, a folded note appeared beneath the connecting door. You asked to remain a healer. The Eastern Infirmary is yours to use. Emily smiled despite herself and wrote beneath his words, that might be the nicest wedding gift anyone has ever given me. The paper disappeared. It returned moments later. I was told jewelry was traditional. She wrote, jewelry cannot cure a fever. His answer came quickly. You are difficult to impress. You married me anyway. The note remained gone longer this time. When it returned, Ethan had written only. Apparently. Emily laughed softly before remembering he could not hear it. The thought erased her smile. Over the following days, their strange marriage settled into an even stranger rhythm. Emily spent mornings in the Eastern Infirmary and evenings at royal dinners, where Ethan endured conversations by watching faces with relentless concentration. He never complained when someone spoke too quickly. He simply missed what they said. Emily began repeating important remarks while facing him directly, never drawing attention to what she was doing. By the fourth evening, Ethan noticed. By the fifth, he started leaving notes beside her breakfast plate. Council meeting lasted 3 hours. I recommend becoming a farmer. Emily wrote back. You would frighten the chickens. His reply arrived before she finished her coffee. At last, a useful royal talent. The notes became their private language. Yet another pattern troubled her. Ethan rarely slept through the night. Twice, Emily saw a light beneath the connecting door after 2 in the morning. On the 6th night, she was returning from the infirmary when she found him sitting alone near a corridor window, one hand pressed tightly over his left ear. His eyes were closed. Emily approached where he could see her shadow before she came close. Ethan immediately lowered his hand. Do not pretend it does not hurt, she said, facing him. His jaw tightened. He reached for the small notebook he now carried everywhere around her. It passes. How often? He hesitated. Most nights. Emily crouched several feet away rather than invading his space. May I look? Ethan stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. She took a small lamp from the wall table and moved closer. The outer ear looked normal. No swelling. No visible injury. Emily adjusted the light, remembering her mother's lessons about looking past the obvious. Ethan remained perfectly still. Then the flame shifted. Deep inside his left ear, something caught the light. Not red. Not natural shadow. A thin, dark glimmer, almost metallic, vanished when Ethan moved his head. Emily's breath stopped. "What?" he asked, reading her face instead of her lips. Emily lifted the lamp. Again, this time she saw it clearly. Something was inside the Alpha King's ear, buried far deeper than anything that should have been there. Emily did not touch the dark glimmer. Every instinct she had inherited from her mother warned her that discovering something was not the same as understanding it. She lowered the lamp and stepped back. Ethan watched her face carefully. "There is something there," she said, making each word clear. His expression barely changed, but his fingers tightened around the notebook. He wrote, "The royal healers have examined me for years." Emily nodded. "Then I want to know what they were looking for." Ethan studied her before writing again. "You think they missed something?" "I think I saw something." She held his gaze. "Those are different statements." That earned the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth. Even now, he appreciated precision. Emily sat across from him near the corridor window while snow drifted beyond the glass. "Were you born deaf?" she asked. Ethan's amusement disappeared. He wrote slowly this time. "No." Emily felt her attention sharpen. "When did you lose your hearing?" His pencil stopped. For several seconds, he stared at the page rather than answering. Then he wrote, 12 years ago. Emily calculated quickly. Ethan would have been 19. What happened? He leaned back, silver gray eyes fixed on some memory far beyond the corridor. There was a royal ceremony. An old Blackwood tradition before an heir formally assumes greater duties. I remember entering the ceremonial chamber. I remember incense. A silver bell. He paused, then added. The next morning, I could hear nothing. Emily read the words twice. Nothing at all. Ethan shook his head. Did you have pain? He nodded. For several weeks. Then occasionally. The healers said the pain was caused by damage that would never recover. Emily looked toward his left ear. And the right. Silent. Usually painless. That difference mattered. Her mother had taught her to distrust explanations that required unlike symptoms to share one convenient cause. Who examined you first? Ethan wrote a name she recognized immediately. Dr. Victor Hale. Emily's stomach tightened. Victor had served the Blackwood family longer than Emily had been practicing medicine. His reputation reached every pack in the Northern Territories. Questioning his diagnosis would be treated as arrogance. Questioning 12 years of it would be something worse. Ethan seemed to read the hesitation in her face. Say it. Emily almost smiled at the irony of those words written by a man who could not hear her answer. I do not think your story sounds like ordinary hearing loss. Ethan became completely still. Emily continued. I am not promising I can restore anything. I will not give you hope just because hope sounds kinder than uncertainty. But the pain, the reaction to certain vibrations, and what I saw tonight do not fit together the way they should. Ethan looked down at the notebook. What did you see? A dark reflective point deep in the left ear. Very small. Possibly metallic. Possibly something else. His eyes lifted sharply. Emily expected disbelief. Instead, she saw something more guarded. Fear, perhaps, though an Alpha King would have learned long ago how to disguise it. He wrote, Why has nobody mentioned it? Emily had no answer she trusted. Tomorrow I want your medical records. All of them. Especially the first year. Ethan nodded, then stood. Before leaving, he stopped and wrote one final question. Why do you care so much? Emily looked at him, surprised. Because you are in pain. He waited, as though expecting another reason. There was none. Emily gathered her medicine case and returned to her room, but sleep would not come. Near 3 a.m, she opened an old trunk containing the few belongings she had kept from her mother. Beneath dried lavender and faded notebooks lay a small leather journal Emily had not touched in years. She turned through pages of remedies, sketches, and observations until one drawing made her hand stop. It showed a thin black object with a silver edge. Beside it, in her mother's handwriting, were 3 words Emily had never expected to see. Silverwake Sensory Thorn. Emily read the entry until the words blurred beneath the candlelight. Her mother described silverwake as an old substance once used in ceremonial medicine, a dark mineral thorn no longer accepted by modern healers because its effects were difficult to predict. Properly prepared, it could suppress a wolf's senses for several hours. Left in place, however, it could interfere with those senses far longer. Emily's pulse quickened. The sketch matched what she had seen inside Ethan's left ear. At sunrise, she carried the journal to the Royal Archive, where Ethan's medical records were already waiting. 12 years of examinations filled 3 heavy boxes. Emily spent hours reading them. Every report reached the same conclusion: permanent hearing loss. No recovery expected. Yet the earliest records bothered her. Ethan had complained of pressure, dizziness, and sharp discomfort after the ceremony. Those symptoms gradually faded, but nobody had documented a thorough search for a foreign object. More troubling, Dr. Victor Hale had personally signed nearly every page from that first month. By noon, Emily requested a meeting with the Royal Medical Council. Victor arrived wearing a dark blue coat with silver buttons, his white hair perfectly arranged, his expression courteous until he saw the leather journal beside Emily. Ethan sat at the head of the long council table. Ryan stood near him, so he could repeat anything Ethan missed. 6 senior healers filled the remaining chairs. Emily placed her mother's drawing beside a copied medical report. I believe His Majesty's condition may have been misidentified. Silence settled over the room. Victor looked at her as if she had announced that winter was optional. On what basis? Emily turned so Ethan could see her clearly. His hearing disappeared suddenly after a ceremony 12 years ago. His left ear still reacts painfully to certain vibrations. Last night, I observed a reflective object deep inside that ear. Victor gave a soft laugh. Several healers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Miss Carter, reflections occur naturally during examination. I know. And you have been practicing independently for how many years? 5. His smile widened. I have treated royal families longer than you have been alive. Emily felt heat rise into her face, but she kept her hands still. Victor picked up her mother's journal. Silverwake sensory thorn, he read, almost indulgently. A discarded theory from folk medicine. Emily reached for the journal before he could close it. A theory that matches his symptoms. Coincidence is not diagnosis. Neither is reputation. Ryan suddenly looked down, hiding what might have been a smile. Victor did not. You are suggesting that dozens of trained healers overlooked something for 12 years. Emily met his gaze. I am suggesting that repeating the same conclusion for 12 years does not make it correct. The room went very still. Ethan watched her with an intensity that made her aware of every breath. Victor turned toward him. Your Majesty, this woman has been in the palace barely a week. Allowing her to interfere with a stable condition would be irresponsible. Ethan read Ryan's repetition, then looked at Emily. For one terrible moment, she wondered whether she had gone too far. Then Ethan reached for his notebook. He wrote a sentence and slid it across the table. Ryan read it aloud. Let her finish. Victor's face changed. Only slightly. But Emily saw it. The confidence disappeared for half a second, replaced by something colder. She opened her mother's journal to the next page. There, beneath the drawing, was one final warning she had missed during the night. Silverwake did not simply suppress a sense. In wolves of royal blood, it could bind itself to the body's natural energy and remain hidden for years. Emily looked from the page to Ethan, then to Victor. There is one way to determine whether my mother was right, she said. Victor's hand closed around the edge of the table. And what would that be? Emily held his gaze. I need to examine the king again. This time, I know exactly what I am looking for. Victor Hale was the first to object. Absolutely not. His answer came too quickly, cutting through the council chamber before Emily had even closed her mother's journal. Ethan did not hear the sharpness in Victor's voice, but he saw every face turn. Ryan stepped into his line of sight and repeated the words. Ethan's silver-gray eyes settled on Victor. The older healer straightened. Your Majesty, another examination serves no purpose. Miss Carter is relying on an outdated journal and an unproven theory. We should not encourage this. Emily felt every eye move toward her. A week ago, she would have lowered her gaze. Years of being dismissed had taught her that silence was often safer than challenging people whose titles entered rooms before they did. But Ethan had lived inside another kind of silence for 12 years. Safety suddenly seemed like a poor excuse. Then let him decide, Emily said. Victor turned toward her. This is a medical matter. It is his body. The words landed softly, yet nobody interrupted. Emily looked directly at Ethan so he would not need Ryan to translate. I cannot promise that I am right. I cannot promise that examining you again will change anything. But I can promise that I will stop the moment you ask me to. Victor shook his head. Your Majesty, she does not understand what she is dealing with. Emily opened her mother's journal and placed it on the table. Maybe I do not. Her voice remained steady. But I am the first person in this room asking why his left ear still hurts. Victor's expression tightened. Ethan noticed. Emily could tell because his gaze shifted from Victor to the medical records and then back to her. For several seconds, nobody moved. Finally, Ethan picked up his notebook. His pencil traveled slowly across the page. He turned it toward Victor. Leave. Victor stared at the word. Your Majesty. Ethan tapped the page once. No anger. No raised voice. Somehow that made the command heavier. One by one, the council healers gathered their papers and followed Victor toward the doors. Ryan remained until Ethan gave him a small nod. Then even he stepped outside. Emily and Ethan were alone. The enormous council chamber suddenly felt different without an audience. Ethan wrote again. You were afraid. Emily looked at him. Of being wrong. She considered pretending otherwise, then shook her head. Yes. His pencil moved. Yet you challenged Victor. Emily read the sentence and met his eyes. I was more afraid that everyone would keep agreeing with him because nobody wanted to look. Foolish. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Emily remembered Madison's mysterious 30 days, the wedding, and the unanswered questions surrounding all of it. She still did not know why Ethan had chosen her. Yet sitting across from him now, she saw no king playing some private game. She saw a man who had spent 12 years being told there was nothing left to investigate. Ethan pushed the notebook toward her. Why should I trust you? Emily swallowed. There were answers that might impress a king. She could mention her mother's work or the records she had studied until dawn. Instead, she wrote beneath his question. You should not. Not yet. His eyebrows lifted. Emily continued. Trust should not come from my title, because I barely have one. It should not come from confidence, because confidence can be wrong. Let me show you what I found. Then decide for yourself. Ethan read every word. Something in his face softened. He turned to a fresh page and wrote, What do you need? Emily released a breath she had not realized she was holding. A brighter examination lamp. My mother's brass instrument. And time. Ethan nodded. Then, unexpectedly, he wrote another sentence. No Victor. Emily almost smiled. No Victor. That afternoon, the Eastern Infirmary was cleared. Emily positioned the brightest lamp beside a high-backed chair while Ethan sat perfectly still. She brought the brass instrument toward his left ear, adjusted the angle, and waited for the light to catch. Nothing. She shifted it barely an inch. A dark silver point appeared in the reflection. Emily froze. Ethan immediately saw the answer on her face. He reached for the notebook resting on his knee. Is it there? Emily looked again, making certain before she answered. This time there was no doubt. The object was real, and it was deeper than she had feared. She lowered the instrument slowly. Yes, she said. Ethan watched her lips. It is there. Emily kept the lamp steady, although her pulse had begun to race. The dark silver point was no trick of reflection. It sat deep inside Ethan's left ear, so small that an examiner searching only for ordinary damage could have overlooked it, yet too perfectly. Positioned to feel accidental. She lowered the brass instrument and moved where Ethan could see her face. I found it. His eyes dropped to her lips. He did not celebrate. He simply reached for his notebook. Can you remove it? Emily looked back toward the instrument. I do not know yet. Ethan's expression tightened. That is not the answer a king usually receives. Then perhaps kings need more honest healers. For a moment, he stared at her. Then the corner of his mouth lifted. The humor disappeared when Emily opened her mother's journal beside him. She showed him the drawing of the silverwake thorn and pointed to the warning beneath it. If this is what I think it is, it may have bonded with your natural alpha energy. Pulling it out carelessly could make the pressure worse. It could also affect your balance or other senses temporarily. Ethan read her lips, then the journal. His pencil moved. But leaving it means continuing as I am. Emily nodded. Until we understand more. She spent the next hour examining him from different angles. The object seemed no longer than a fraction of an inch. dark along the center with a narrow silver edge. Whenever the examination lamp struck it directly, Ethan's wolf reacted before he did. His silver-gray eyes brightened, his shoulders stiffened, and a strange pressure filled the room. Emily immediately moved the light away. Ethan relaxed. That was enough. It responds to you, she said. He frowned. To my ear. To your wolf. Ethan became still. Emily turned several pages in her mother's journal. One passage described Silverwake as harmless to ordinary metal instruments, but unusually responsive to old alpha bloodlines. The implication made her uneasy. This was no random fragment that had somehow entered his ear. Someone would have needed knowledge, access, and opportunity. 12 years earlier, Ethan had entered a royal ceremony able to hear. The next morning, he had awakened in silence. Emily closed the journal. I need to prepare before I attempt anything. Ethan wrote, how long? A day? Maybe 2. His frustration showed immediately. After 12 years, 2 days should have been nothing. Somehow, now that an answer existed, waiting seemed crueler than ignorance. Emily understood. I will not make you wait longer than necessary. Ethan studied her, then wrote, why did Victor not find it? The question sat between them. Emily could have offered a dozen explanations, but none would be honest. I do not know. Ethan watched her carefully. You suspect something. Emily hesitated. I suspect that we do not have enough information. She began putting away her instruments. As she reached for the lamp, Ethan touched the edge of the table to get her attention. He wrote another question. If you discover that removing it is dangerous, will you still try? Emily shook her head. His face hardened with disappointment until she added, not unless you understand the risk and choose it yourself. Ethan looked down at those words for a long time. People had probably spent years making decisions around his deafness, speaking for him, protecting him, deciding what truths he could tolerate. Emily refused to become another one of them. She turned to gather the journal, but Ethan slid his notebook into her path. 3 words waited on the page. I trust you. Emily's hand stopped. A week earlier, she had been an unnoticed healer carrying herbs through his ballroom. Now the Alpha King was placing 12 years of silence in her hands. She looked at him and nodded once. Then her eyes fell to the Silverwake drawing again. Beneath the medical notes, almost hidden near the binding, her mother had written one final observation. Silverwake thorns made for royal blood were never created alone. Each one carried the mark of the person who commissioned it. By the following evening, the Eastern Infirmary no longer felt like Emily's quiet refuge. Ethan had ordered the examination witnessed, not because he doubted her, but because whatever came out of his ear might become evidence. Ryan stood near the windows. 3 senior healers waited beside the long oak table. Victor Hale had been permitted to attend only after Ethan insisted that every physician connected to his original treatment be present. Victor remained near the back, composed and silent. Emily noticed he had not once looked at her mother's journal. Rain tapped against the tall windows, though Ethan knew it only from the silver trails running down the glass. Emily arranged her instruments beneath the brightest lamp in the room. Her mother's brass viewer, a narrow pair of medical forceps, clean cloth, a shallow silver tray. Everything looked ordinary. Nothing about the moment felt ordinary. Ethan sat in the high-back chair and watched her preparations. Emily approached from the front so he could see her. Once I begin, stay as still as you can. If you want me to stop, raise your hand. He nodded. There may be pressure. Another nod. Emily hesitated. And I still cannot promise what happens afterward. Ethan reached for the notebook resting beside him. Neither could anyone for 12 years. She read the sentence, then looked at him. His expression held no impatience now, only decision. Emily positioned the lamp and brought the brass viewer carefully toward his left ear. The dark silver point appeared almost immediately. She adjusted the light. Ethan's shoulders tightened. His eyes flashed brighter, and Emily pulled the lamp back until the reaction faded. Still there? Ryan asked quietly. Emily nodded without looking away. Exactly where it was. Victor finally spoke. Then document it and stop. There is no reason to attempt removal tonight. Ryan repeated the statement where Ethan could see him. Ethan's gaze moved to Victor, then returned to Emily. She felt the weight of the choice settle on her hands. Her mother's warning echoed through her memory. Royal Silverwake could bind itself to alpha energy. Removing it required patience, not force. Emily lifted the forceps, then stopped before touching anything. Her fingers were trembling. She lowered them. Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything. He reached out and gently closed his hand around her wrist for one brief second. Emily looked at him. He released her and picked up his notebook. You do not have to prove anything. The words struck deeper than reassurance should have. Emily had spent years proving herself to people who had already decided what an Omega healer could not know. Ethan was giving her permission to fail before she had even begun. She shook her head. I am not doing this to prove them wrong. Her eyes moved toward Victor, then back to Ethan. I am doing it because you deserve to know whether silence was truly your fate. Ethan read her lips carefully. Then he wrote 2 words. I trust you. Emily breathed in slowly. The trembling stopped. She raised the viewer again, found the silver edge, and guided the forceps toward it. The instant the instrument touched the object, Ethan's eyes widened. His hand tightened around the chair arm. Emily froze. Stop, she asked. Ethan waited, then shook his head. Around them, the room became so quiet Emily could hear the rain against the windows and Ryan's measured breathing. She adjusted the forceps by barely a fraction of an inch. The dark object shifted. Victor stepped forward. Emily, stop. This time Ethan did not need Ryan to repeat anything. He saw Victor move. His gaze sharpened. Emily looked at the object again. For the first time, enough of its silver edge had emerged to reveal something engraved upon it. Not a scratch. Not corrosion. A symbol. Emily's breath caught. Victor went pale. Ethan saw that too. Emily tightened her grip on the forceps and whispered, It has a mark. The mark changed everything. Emily kept the forceps perfectly still while the tiny silver edge caught the examination lamp. Ethan could not see the engraving from his chair, but he saw Victor's face, and that seemed to tell him enough. Ryan moved closer. What kind of mark? Emily did not answer immediately. Her entire focus remained on Ethan. The silverwake thorn had shifted less than half an inch, yet his breathing had changed. She raised her free hand where he could see it. I am going to continue very slowly. Ethan nodded. Victor stepped forward again. This has gone far enough. Ryan turned sharply toward him, but Emily did not look away from her work. Then stand back. Victor's composure cracked for only a second. You do not understand what you are touching. Emily's fingers stopped. Those words were different from his earlier objections. Not dangerous. Not irresponsible. He had said what? As though he knew. Ethan saw Emily's expression change. He reached for his notebook, but she gently shook her head. Not now. She adjusted the angle of the forceps. The thorn moved another fraction of an inch. Ethan closed his eyes. For 12 years, his world had existed without sound. He knew thunder only by windows trembling. He knew music by moving strings. He knew laughter by the shape of joy on another person's face. Now something strange passed through the silence. Not sound exactly. A sensation. A faint pulse somewhere beyond the wall he had stopped believing could ever open. His eyes snapped toward Emily. She saw the question immediately. What is it? Ethan lifted one finger, asking her to wait. Everyone froze. Rain traced the windows. Fire moved in the hearth. Somewhere down the corridor, a clock marked the hour. Ethan heard none of those things. Then Emily's forceps shifted slightly, and a faint vibration seemed to bloom inside his head. He stared at her. Hope was dangerous. Emily knew that. She refused to name what neither of them could yet prove. Ready? She asked. Ethan nodded. Emily drew one slow breath and continued. The dark object emerged farther, revealing a narrow black center wrapped in silver. The engraved symbol became clearer. Ryan leaned closer to the tray. Victor took one step backward. Emily noticed, but she could not divide her attention now. The thorn resisted for a final second, almost as though it belonged where it had been hidden. Then it released. Emily's hand moved away. A tiny object dropped into the silver tray. Clink. Ethan jerked upright. Emily froze. Ryan stopped breathing. The senior healers stared at the king. Ethan's eyes widened as if the room itself had changed shape. His gaze fell to the tray. Clink. He had heard it. Not imagined it. Heard it. Then another sound reached him, soft and uneven. Rain. His face turned slowly toward the windows. Thousands of drops whispered against the glass. The fire crackled behind Ryan. Fabric rustled as one healer covered her mouth. Ethan stood too quickly, overwhelmed by a world returning all at once. Emily immediately stepped into his line of sight. Ethan. His head turned toward her before he could read her lips. Emily's breath caught. She moved slightly to his left. Ethan. Again, he followed the sound. Not her mouth. Her voice. His expression broke into something Emily had never seen on him before, wonder stripped of every royal defense. Emily, he said quietly. Then he stopped, hearing his own voice for the first time in 12 years. She smiled, tears brightening her eyes. You can hear me. Ethan stared at her as though her voice were the only sound in the room. Behind them, Victor moved toward the door. Ryan noticed and blocked his path without touching him. Emily looked down at the silver tray. The thorn rested beneath the lamp, its engraved mark fully visible now. She recognized the shape from portraits throughout Blackwood Palace. A crowned wolf beneath 3 winter stars. Ethan stepped beside her. The wonder vanished from his face. He knew that symbol. Everyone in the room did. It belonged to an old branch of the Blackwood royal family, a branch that had challenged Ethan's succession 12 years earlier. Emily looked toward Victor. This time, he would not meet her eyes. For 12 years, Ethan had imagined what it would be like to hear again. He had expected something grand, perhaps music or thunder, but the sounds that held him motionless were painfully ordinary. Rain against glass. The low crackle of the fire. Ryan breathing beside him. Emily setting the forceps onto the table with a soft metallic click. Each sound arrived with its own shape, its own distance, and Ethan seemed afraid that if he moved too quickly, the world might disappear again. Emily watched him absorb it all until his gaze returned to the silver tray. Wonder gave way to something colder. I know that crest, Ethan said. He paused at the sound of his own voice, then continued more quietly. House Blackwood of Wintermere. Ryan nodded. Your uncle's branch. The room changed. Emily remembered the records from 12 years earlier. Ethan had been 19, approaching greater royal authority. The Wintermere branch had challenged his succession during the same period. Their claim had eventually collapsed, and most had withdrawn from court. Victor Hale had remained. Emily looked at him. You recognized the thorn. Before I removed it, Victor's face remained controlled. I recognized the possibility of danger. You said I did not understand what I was touching. Victor glanced toward Ethan. Because you did not. Ethan heard every word now. There was no notebook between him and the people who had spoken around his silence for years. Then explain it, he said. Victor swallowed. Your Majesty, this is not the place. Ethan's eyes hardened. For 12 years, people decided what I should know because I could not hear them discussing it. You will not decide that anymore. Victor lowered his gaze. Emily felt no triumph. Only a growing sadness as pieces began fitting together. She opened her mother's journal and compared the crest beneath the lamp. The crowned wolf. 3 winter stars. Exact. Ryan requested the sealed archive from the original ceremony. Within an hour, 2 clerks arrived carrying a narrow cedar box that had not been opened in years. Inside were attendance records, supply lists, and signatures from everyone authorized to enter the ceremonial chamber. Emily stood beside Ethan as Ryan read the names aloud. Then he stopped. Dr. Victor Hale. The room became silent again, but now Ethan could hear that silence. Victor closed his eyes. I was there, he admitted. Ethan did not move. Why? Victor looked suddenly older. I was ordered to prepare the ceremonial medicine. By whom? Victor hesitated. Ryan placed the old document on the table. Near Victor's signature was another name, written in faded black ink. Lord Marcus Blackwood of Wintermere, Ethan's late uncle. Victor finally spoke. Your uncle believed a king who could not hear council meetings, warnings, or private negotiations would eventually be declared unfit to rule. He wanted authority transferred to Wintermere. Emily's stomach tightened. And the thorn. Victor looked toward the tray. I was told its effect would last only a few days. Ethan's voice was almost a whisper. 12 years. Victor's composure finally failed. When your hearing did not return, I panicked. Removing it later could have exposed everything. So I kept repeating the original diagnosis. No one spoke. Ethan turned toward the rain. For years, he had believed silence was simply the life fate had chosen for him. Now every drop against the window carried proof that it had been chosen by someone else. Emily stepped beside him but did not touch him. She simply stayed. After a moment, Ethan looked at her. Your voice was the first one I heard clearly. Emily's eyes softened. Then I am glad the first thing I said was your name. A small, almost disbelieving smile crossed his face. Ryan quietly instructed the royal staff to escort Victor to a private chamber until the council could conduct a formal inquiry. No threats, no spectacle, just accountability waiting behind a closed door. Ethan watched Victor leave, then turned back to Emily. Tomorrow, the court hears the truth, and they hear what you did. Emily should have felt relieved. Instead, she remembered Madison's raised champagne glass and the 2 words she had mouthed after the wedding. 30 days. Before Emily could ask, the infirmary doors opened. Madison Reed stood there, her expression unreadable. Her gaze moved from Ethan to Emily, then to the silver-wake thorn. How touching, she said. Ethan stiffened at hearing her voice. Madison gave him a brittle smile. Now that you can hear again, Ethan, perhaps it is time your wife heard the truth too. Madison's words landed softly, but Emily felt them before she understood them. Ethan turned toward Madison, and for the first time since his hearing returned, there was a sound he clearly wished he had never heard. Not now, he said. Madison gave a small, humorless smile. That is convenient. Emily looked between them. Ryan lowered his eyes. That was enough. The uneasiness she had carried since the wedding returned with sudden clarity. The raised champagne glass. Ryan's refusal to celebrate. Madison silently forming those 2 strange words across the hall. 30 days. Tell me, Emily said. Ethan stepped toward her. Emily, please. Her voice remained calm, which somehow made the room feel colder. I would rather hear something painful from you than something comfortable from everyone else. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. 12 years without sound, and now truth itself seemed unbearably loud. At the winter moon ball, Madison proposed a wager. Emily did not move. What kind of wager? Ethan looked directly at her. That I could not remain married to an ordinary Omega for 30 days without regretting it. The rain whispered against the windows. Emily heard every drop. And you accepted? Ethan's silence answered first. Then he said, yes. Emily felt as though the floor had shifted beneath her, though nothing in the room moved. She remembered standing before him with her medicine case. She remembered asking why he had chosen her. She remembered his written answer. You noticed something others did not. It had not been a complete lie. Somehow that made it hurt more. Was that why the guards brought me to you? Yes. Was that why you proposed? Ethan swallowed. At first, Madison's expression changed, perhaps because she had expected anger, humiliation, perhaps even tears. Emily gave her none. She simply looked at Ethan. And when I asked whether the marriage was political, you told me no. It was not political. You knew what I was really asking. Ethan had no defense against that. He heard the disappointment in her voice with perfect clarity. I should have told you. Yes. 2 words. Quiet. Final. Ethan stepped closer, then stopped himself several feet away. The wager stopped mattering almost immediately. Emily looked at him. But it mattered when you chose me. I was arrogant. His voice roughened. I treated a decision that would change your life as entertainment. There is no explanation that makes that honorable. Ryan looked toward him, surprised. Kings were trained to justify themselves. Ethan did not. Emily glanced at the silver tray where the tiny thorn still rested. She had spent days trying to return something stolen from Ethan without his consent. Now the irony settled painfully inside her. You know what is hardest? She asked. Ethan waited. I kept thinking about how unfair it was that people made decisions around your deafness without letting you choose. I wanted you to have the truth because your life belonged to you. Her eyes shone, but her voice remained steady. And all that time, you were keeping the truth about my own marriage from me. Ethan looked down. He had no notebook to hide behind now. No silence to soften what she said. Emily slowly removed the wedding ring from her finger and placed it on the table. The tiny sound it made against the wood seemed impossibly loud. Ethan stared at it. Emily, please. She looked at him one last time. Was I ever anything more than a joke to you? Ethan answered immediately. Yes. Long before tonight. Long before you healed me. His voice broke around the truth. But I understand why you cannot believe that yet. Emily nodded once. That answer hurt because it sounded sincere. She picked up her mother's journal and medicine case. Ethan did not command her to stay. He did not reach for her. He simply stood in the world of sound she had returned to him and listened as her footsteps crossed the infirmary. At the doorway, Emily paused, but she did not turn around. You wanted to know why I cared about your pain, she said. Because I thought kindness should never require someone to earn it. Then she walked away. Ethan heard the door close behind her. Of all the sounds returned to him that night, that was the one he would remember most. By morning, everyone at Blackwood Palace knew two truths. The Alpha King could hear again, and his wife had left the royal wing. Emily had not gone far. She returned to the Eastern Infirmary because patients still needed medicine, records still needed organizing, and ordinary work gave her hands something to do while her heart caught up with everything that had changed. At noon, the great council hall filled with nobles, healers, pack leaders, and witnesses from the Winter Moon Ball. Emily received a formal summons, but when she entered, Ethan did not ask her to stand beside him. He had placed a chair near the front for her, away from the royal platform, giving her the choice to stay or leave. She stayed. Ethan rose. For several seconds, he simply listened. The rustle of clothing, the crackle of the fireplace, the faint winter wind against the tall windows. 12 years ago, people in rooms like this had spoken around him. Today, every whisper reached him. Dr. Victor Hale has admitted his role in concealing the cause of my condition, Ethan said. A formal inquiry will determine the full responsibility of everyone involved. Victor stood quietly beside two council officers, awaiting that process. Ethan did not linger on him. Instead, his gaze found Emily. But there is another truth this court will hear from me. Madison shifted in her seat. Ryan remained perfectly still. I married Emily Carter because I accepted a foolish wager. Murmurs swept through the hall. Ethan let them come. Do not blame Madison Reed for my decision. She proposed the wager. I accepted it. The dishonor belongs to me. Emily's throat tightened. Ethan could have hidden the story. He could have protected his reputation. Instead, he was placing the ugliest part of himself beneath the brightest light in the kingdom. Emily owed me nothing, he continued. Yet when others dismissed my pain, she noticed it. When experts defended their certainty, she questioned it. When she had every reason to protect herself, she chose to help me. His voice softened. She returned my hearing before she knew whether I deserved her kindness. No one laughed now. Ethan looked toward Ryan. Ryan stepped forward carrying a small document. Ethan took it and tore it once through the center. The wager is ended. There is no winner. Madison lowered her eyes. Ethan descended from the royal platform and stopped several feet from Emily. He did not reach for her. The marriage will continue only if Emily chooses it. If she does not, the crown will honor that decision without question. Emily stared at him. This was not the man who had summoned an unknown Omega across a ballroom because someone challenged his pride. That man had believed power meant never appearing uncertain. The man before her was allowing hundreds of people to watch him receive an answer he could not control. Emily rose slowly. Ethan's breathing changed, but he said nothing. She walked toward the doors. Whispers followed her, and Ethan heard every one. He did not command them to stop. He only watched Emily leave. Her hand reached the door. Emily. She stopped. His voice traveled across the hall without force or royal authority. I married you because of a bet. Ethan swallowed. But somewhere between your notes at breakfast, the way you faced me when you spoke, and the moment you cared about my pain when there was nothing to gain from it, the wager became something I was ashamed I had ever made. Emily closed her eyes. I am not asking you to forgive me today. His next words came quieter. I am asking for the chance to become someone you might choose freely someday. Emily turned. For a long moment, neither moved. Then she gave him the smallest nod. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But not goodbye. Weeks later, Ethan found her in the Eastern Infirmary arranging bottles beside the window. He stopped in the doorway and listened to her humming softly while she worked. Emily noticed him and smiled. Still getting used to sound? One sound in particular. She raised an eyebrow. Ethan smiled. This time, there was no audience, no wager, and nothing for either of them to win. He crossed the room only when Emily held out her hand. And when their fingers met, the Alpha King finally understood what 12 years of silence had never taught him. Power could make an entire kingdom listen. Trust was what made one person choose to stay.